When I was a child, I would always watch the Olympics every 2 years. Hell, one of the earliest games I remember playing was Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Winter Games, released during the Vancouver Olympics in 2010. During the summer of the 2012 London Games, I had trouble sleeping, and I would sit in my living room for long hours into the night watching the events. I looked up to these athletes. I still do. Of course, as a child, I didn't hear any discourse about whether the competitors were men masquerading as women, or whether trans people should be allowed to compete or not. 10-year-old me would be surprised to hear that one of the biggest controversies of the 2024 Olympic Games would stem from a lie and a complete misunderstanding of gender, sex, and even race. Even though a known child rapist was competing in one of the events, anti-trans pundits online would instead focus on a different competitor, Algerian boxer Imane Khelif. On August 1st, Khelif faced off against Angela Carini of Italy in the competition's round of 16, but the match ended in just 46 seconds after Carini forfeited the match, saying she could not continue, as the Associated Press reported. Anti-trans activist took the 46-second clip of the match and ran with it. Carini's loss and lack of sportsmanship would only be one part of the equation, for her competitor was not simply an athlete who beat her opponent. No. She was a darker-skinned woman who didn't fit neatly into society's ideas of femininity like the smaller and whiter Carini did. Logan Paul, who was well known for his informative political videos and love of Forrest, tweeted, "This is the purest form of evil unfolding right before your eyes. A man was allowed to beat up a woman on a global stage, crushing her life's dream while fighting for her deceased father. This delusion must end." Self-proclaimed hillbilly and Vice President J.D. Vance tweeted, "This is where Kamala Harris's ideas about gender lead, to a grown man pummeling a woman in a boxing match. This is disgusting, and all of our leaders should condemn it." Disowned father and CEO of 3 separate companies, Elon Musk, quote retweeted a post from famous anti-trans Twitter user Riley Gaines, saying, "Absolutely." However, the most notable of all, and the one who could be almost solely credited for allegedly kickstarting this months-long harassment campaign, was mold connoisseur J.K. Rowling, who tweeted following the match, "Could any picture sum up a new men's rights movement better? The smirk of a male who knows that he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head, and whose life ambition he just shattered." Included was an image of Khelif patting the distressed Carini on the back after Carini refused to shake Khelif's hand. Despite the fact that there was no evidence to support the assumption that Khelif was transgender, an online harassment campaign was launched her way for her win against Carini. What were people's reasons for why they believed Khelif was actually trans? Well, just look at her. Carini herself said she was not making a political statement about Khelif, and later said at a press conference she could not push through the pain of Khelif's first punches, even apologizing for not shaking Khelif's hand. "I was angry because my Olympics had gone up in smoke," Carini told reporters. "I don't have anything against Khelif. Actually, if I were to meet her again, I would embrace her." Following this, discussions were sparked about the dangers of transvestigation, and the trans sport debate was rehashed yet again online and in the media. A lawsuit was even filed against Rowling and Musk, who were named in a criminal complaint filed to French authorities over alleged acts of aggravated cyber harassment. Despite being born female and not identifying as transgender or intersex, and being backed by the International Olympic Committee, who asserted scientifically this is not a man fighting a woman, Khelif faced a torrent of accusations and abuse over her gender. Following the outrage, Khelif responded, "I am a woman, like any other woman. I was born a woman. I have lived as a woman. I compete as a woman." The people who tweeted immediately after the match did so with not even a lick of factual basis for their unfounded claims. The most absurd part of it all, transitioning is illegal in Algeria. Sure, someone could transition, but doing so would put them in harm's way, not only from the public, but also from their government. An idiot could deduce that it would be impossible for a transgender athlete to compete on a global scale for a country that criminalizes them. In the minds of anti-trans reactionaries, though, they can tell if someone is transgender simply by looking at them. Factual or logical arguments aside. Today I'll be tackling the issue of transvestigation, as well as intersex and transgender competitors in sports. I've been wanting to do this video since the Olympics, but I was hesitant to do so for fear of backlash. I've realized recently, though, that I don't really give a fuck. For decades, people have made offhanded quips about the way that certain men and women present. "I think she's actually a man," or "there's no way he's a real man." While there is a history of discrimination across the globe for gender nonconforming and trans people, there hasn't been a word to describe this kind of investigation into someone's perceived sex and gender until fairly recently. On Facebook, along with mounds of AI photos and videos, there are large groups of people who devote their free time to trying to guess whether or not celebrities, or even average people, are really men or women. Margot Robbie, Ryan Gosling, Cameron Diaz, Henry Cavill, and even Andrew Tate have all been transvestigated in these groups. One user screen grabbed an image of Andrew Tate in a Speedo, creepily zooming in on his crotch where there is a limited amount of package, saying, "I guess she forgot to wear her fake eggplant emoji." Famous transgender woman Dylan Mulvaney was even reverse transvestigated recently, with people claiming that she was born a female, forced to transition to a man, and then transitioned back into a woman. A probable double flipper, they said. Far-right pig lover Kyle Rittenhouse has also been accused of being a transgender man. Transvestigation, however, goes far beyond just obsessive lunatics making up words that rival incel language. Transvestigation is an entire conspiracy. Swedish politician Mia Mulder told the Baptist News, "The default belief is that the world at large is dominated by transgender people doing Satan's bidding. Some people are terrified that their local school council has been infiltrated, that their library staff has been infiltrated by transgender people, culling information that is true and replacing it with perverse propaganda." Underneath the transvestigation of Andrew Tate, the original poster wrote, "I told everyone about this a while back. It's all of them. If they are on the stage, they are part of the inverted show. Those sloping shoulders, and her sister is even worse with those huge hips. It's so obvious to me." Transphobic rhetoric along this turf or gender-critical ideology that relies on appearing more modern and sensible is probably more dangerous than transvestigation. The first is trying to trick people into falling for anti-trans panic. The latter is just transphobia with the mask completely and disturbingly off, which few people take seriously. All transphobia is essentially based on conspiracy thinking, a hypothetical belief that trans people are, or could be, dangerous. These people are dedicated to using biological facts to prove that literally anyone is transgender. Their accusation knows no limits. To anyone outside of this small internet niche, what transvestigators do is legitimately insane. But to them, it's just another day. Just another day of zooming in on someone's genitals. Consumed by their obsession of transgender people and afraid that everyone is secretly trans, they assign the label of trans to anyone, therefore deeming harassment towards them as acceptable. Obviously, there is no real way to always tell whether someone is trans. In fact, there is another subset of anti-transvestigation memes on the internet where people use pictures of famous cisgender people to trick transvestigators. Hilariously enough, people have done this with the CEO of ruining people's childhoods, J.K. Rowling. Trolls will use a photo of Markiplier, or of J.K. Rowling, or of another cisgender celebrity and present them as trans, saying something like, "Does this look like a man to you?" More often than not, transvestigators will try to find physical traits on these cisgender celebrities that are obvious tells that make it easy to determine that they're trans. Of course, the person in the photo is not trans. By reversing transvestigators' own tactics onto them, it proves the utter flaccidity of their biological truths. Transvestigators are unlikely to listen to complex arguments on how gender is more nuanced than just man and woman, or how even biological sex is in itself hard to define. Trapping them into arguing that a biological man or woman is actually transgender makes them look stupid and their beliefs ridiculous. People also troll transvestigators by posting photos of trans men and women, intentionally misgendering them in order for a transvestigator to argue the opposite, therefore affirming the trans person's gender. Jessie Gender uploaded a great video 2 years ago about an AI social media app designed by a trans exclusionary radical feminist. In it, she discusses the app itself, but also the dangers of transvestigation towards all women, as well as its racist history. Transvestigation isn't just transphobic and misogynistic, it's also deeply racist. Transvestigators use multiple methods to prove whether someone is male or female. Including just making shit up, they use phenotypes, the set of observable characteristics or traits of an organism which go hand in hand with someone's genetic makeup or genotype. Physiology, the practice of assessing a person's character or personality from their outer appearance, especially the face. And phrenology, a pseudoscience that measures the bumps on the skull in order to determine mental and personality characteristics. While phenotypes are a complementary part of an actual science, physiology and phrenology are more accurately described as pseudosciences, although actual science can be mishandled and weaponized by transvestigators in order to fit their bogus ideology. Miles Klee wrote for Rolling Stone in 2023, discussing the dangers of using these pseudosciences, writing, "Amateur irrational analysis of face and skeletal structure is also key to the booming practice of transvestigation, in which conspiracy theorists paranoid about transgender people attempt to prove that almost everyone besides themselves is secretly trans, usually by means of convoluted diagrams overlaid on photos. The science is completely bogus and consistently bent towards a desired result. Underlying the various strains of this trend are profound anxieties over race and gender." Phrenology especially has had a very racist history. The founder of phrenology, German Franz Joseph Gall, along with his collection of hundreds of human skulls, hypothesizes the brain was made up of multiple organs and that their outward reflection on the size and shape of the skull could determine someone's mental capacity. George Combe, the leader of the phrenological movement for more than 20 years, asserted that the human mind is best understood through phrenology, and that mental qualities are determined by the size, form, and constitution of the brain. Obviously, we know now that different parts of the brain do control different motor and mental functions. However, one's mental function is not determined by the shape and size of their brain, and in turn, the shape and size of their skull. Leaders and pioneers of phrenology had the right idea, but the science was more based on racist pseudoscience than anything else. Phrenological studies, born out of racial bias instead of evidence, came up with ridiculous, unsubstantiated suggestions. For instance, they suggested that Europeans had a strong tendency towards moral and intellectual improvement, and that Asians and Africans were far inferior to the European standard, Consequently, they used these studies to justify colonialism in slavery. Lorenzo Niles Fowler and Orson S. Fowler were also huge in the study of phrenology in the 1800s. In and around 1850, Lorenzo created the phrenology bust, which was a statue of the human head that had the different areas of the brains labeled. At this time, phrenologists would give phrenological readings to paying customers. They were essentially a personality test based on how your skull felt in certain areas. I find that the process of looking up "what color am I?" on Google is much more simple nowadays. On the back of the bust was purportedly a message inscribed from Lorenzo, which read, "For 30 years, I have studied the crania and living heads from all parts of the world, and have found in every instance that there is a perfect correspondence between the conformation of the healthy skull of an individual and his known characteristics. To make my observations available, I prepared a bust of superior form and marked the divisions of the organs in accordance with my researches and varied experience." At this time, American phrenologists argued that Africans were genetically submissive, among other things, in order to justify American slavery. Native Americans were also subject to their racist pseudoscience. In 1838, the Fowlers published a journal which included the analysis of a Sac warrior named Black Hawk, who was captured by the US military in the 1830s and kept prisoner. The journal included an examination of a plaster mold that was made of Black Hawk's head after he had died. The Fowlers investigated Black Hawk's plaster head and confirmed Samuel Morton's analysis that indigenous Americans are savage, warlike, and unwise. When assessing Black Hawk's skull, the Fowlers noted his animal qualities. Samuel Morton had an even bigger collection than Franz Joseph Gall. Over 800 skulls, which were mostly comprised of stolen indigenous remains. Joseph Hurtle, around the height of phrenology in the 1800s, had a collection of 139 skulls, which are now entombed in the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. His work was an attempt to counter the claims of phrenologists who held that cranial features were evidence of intelligence and personality, and that racial differences caused anatomical differences. Hurtle's aim in collecting and studying the skulls was to show that cranial anatomy varied widely in the Caucasian population of Europe. Patrick Kelly did a video on the history of phrenology, including its racist past, so I will link that video down below. I highly recommend that you check it out for more information on the matter. It is not a far reach to draw a comparison between Transvestigators' means of investigation and this racist pseudoscience. On Transvestigation groups online, you'll see plenty of images of people with random lines drawn over their faces to determine whether they have a female or male skull. The male skull is often more broad, while the female skull has a smaller chin, with the eyes positioned differently. Phrenology, while being deeply racist, was also used to justify sexism. Citing 19th century American phrenologist Orson Fowler, historian Dr. Carla Biddle explains that where men were distinguished by their firmness, force, self-esteem, courage, combativeness, and destructiveness, women were known for exquisiteness, emotion, susceptibility, and devotion to offspring, as well as their secrecy, artifice, and nervousness. While transvestigation is rooted in transphobia, it's also very sexist and misogynistic. If, for example, a woman doesn't fit into the traditional and Eurocentric mold of what a woman should look like, they will be accused of secretly being men trying to gain access to women's spaces. Transvestigation like this harms all women across the board, which I will expand on more later. When dark-skinned or black women are transvestigated, however, there is an added element of racism. For hundreds of years, black women have been stereotyped as inherently masculine due to their skin color or ethnic attributes, justifying all kinds of various harassment and violence against them. Assumptions that black women are non-feminine have been firmly embedded throughout US history. If black women in America are stereotyped as unshakable, our research shows that there is another closely linked myth that persists, that black women are less feminine than other women and in fact even emasculating, writes journalist Sharice Jones and academic Kumina Shorter-Gooden in Shifting, The Double Lives of Black Women in America. I'm obviously not the shade of the person who should be at the forefront of this conversation, but I believe that this discussion should still be had regardless of my race. Women like Michelle Obama and notably various black female athletes have been transvestigated to no end. I've heard my own racist family members make remarks before about how they believe that these women are secretly men, no matter how feminine they may be. While racist body shaming in itself is bad enough, the masculinization of the black woman has had severe consequences that have branched into various aspects of life. For example, there is a stereotype that black women are strong, and even that they cannot feel pain. This can translate into severe medical discrimination, like how black women are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than any other race in the United States. Of course, medical discrimination for black people in the United States is also due to other factors that have stemmed from centuries of systemic violence, such as insurance discrimination and the enslaved being commonly experimented on. Female athletes of all races have for years been highly scrutinized for their perceived lack of femininity. From the introduction of women into sports, including the Olympics, their womanhood has been questioned. A woman couldn't possibly be strong enough to compete in track and field, or fast enough to swim the 100-meter freestyle. In 1936, white Missouri native Helen Stevens won the Olympic gold medal in the 100-meter dash. Yahoo News reported that a Polish newspaper correspondent could not accept that Stevens had defeated famed Polish sprinter Stella Walsh. He published a story discrediting Stevens' world record performance by alleging that the tall, muscular American with an unusually deep voice was really a man masquerading as a woman. Olympic officials responded that they had examined Stevens before the competition and confirmed that she was a female. The first known gender verification rule in women's sports took effect less than a week after Stevens' gold medal win in Berlin. Track and Field's international governing body implemented a policy requiring female athletes to submit to physical examination should any protest be filed regarding their sex. During the Cold War Olympics, Eastern European women were heavily scrutinized for their size, once again being compared to men based on their physical attributes alone. While this scandal led to further regulation on athletes who were taking performance-enhancing drugs, it also led to a new humiliating sex test. International track and field officials responded in 1966 with a mandatory sex testing policy often referred to by athletes as the nude parade. Every female participant at that year's Commonwealth Games had to undress on site before the meet and display themselves to doctors for visual inspection. In an interview with NPR's Tested podcast last year, Canadian discus thrower Carol Martin described being taken into a large room underneath the stands and having to pull my pants down in front of this woman so she could see I had a vagina. Nude parades lasted for only 2 years because of how unpopular they were. Though if they existed today, J.K. Rowling would probably be their last supporter alive. Sports governing bodies have used anything from invasive visual examinations, to testosterone test, to chromosome analysis in their long-running attempts to distinguish men from women. The most common outcome has been humiliation for female athletes confronted for the first time with the possibility that their genitalia, internal anatomy, hormones, or chromosomes develop differently than most of their peers. NPR's Tested podcast has 6 episodes and is available on all podcast platforms. I'd highly recommend that you give it a listen. I listened to it for my research for this video, and it gives a very detailed history of sex testing in sports. In the first episode, the host interviewed female athletes who were transvestigated after their performance was questioned. One woman who was a central character throughout the series, Namibia's Christine Boma, was tested and found to have naturally higher testosterone levels than most females. Track and Field's sports governing body, World Athletics, in response gave her a choice: stop competing or take non-medically necessary medication to lower her testosterone levels in order to compete. Boma was listed as a DSD athlete, an athlete who has differences in sexual developments, aka intersex, and was barred from competing due to World Athletics policy on DSD athletes. In March 2023, World Athletics ruled that all athletes with DSD who have 46 XY chromosomes with internal testings rather than ovaries cannot compete in female sport unless they reduce their high testosterone levels for a minimum of 6 months and in some cases 24 months. This ruling would affect the only 13 DSD athletes at the time. Boma ended up taking the medication and returned to competition in 2024, saying that she can run just as fast on the medication. South African track and field athlete Caster Semenya was also forced to submit to a test after her performance in a 2009 competition. Her results showed XY chromosomes, no uterus, and high testosterone levels. Semenya was faced with the same decision as Boma. Yahoo News reported that Semenya wrote in her 2023 memoir, The Race to Be Myself, that the hormones felt like poison. World Athletics now gives sex tests to all female athletes, whereas previously, they only tested on those who had been transvestigated. Human Rights Watch condemned that approach in 2020, pointing out that the athletes being ensnared by sex testing were overwhelmingly women of color from the global south. In 2019, the World Medical Organization condemned World Athletics' decision to make DSD female athletes lower their natural testosterone production in order to compete in limited events, saying, "The WMA demanded the immediate withdrawal of the regulations. It said they constitute a flagrant discrimination based on the genetic variation of female athletes and are contrary to international medical ethics and human rights standards. The WMA fears the regulations would constrain the athletes concerned to take unjustified medication, not based on medical need, in order for them to be allowed to compete, and accordingly require physicians to prescribe such medication." WMA President Dr. Leonid Edelman said, "We have strong reservations about the ethical validity of these regulations. They are based on weak evidence from a single study, which is currently being widely debated by the scientific community." Ugandan runner Annette Nagisa was even forced to get surgery in order to compete in the 2012 London Olympics. After being named Athlete of the Year by the Uganda Athletics Foundation, World Athletics performed a gender test on her, finding that she had external female genitalia, but also internal male organs that produce similar levels of testosterone to males. Nagisa says that World Athletics encouraged her to get the surgery, though they denied this. The years since the surgery have been a struggle. Nagisa has battled persistent headaches and achy joints. Her post-operative care, she said, has not included the kind of hormone treatment that may have helped her body adjust to the change. On the morning of her surgery in Kampala, she had little knowledge of what she was about to undergo. Doctors had told her that it was a simple surgery and she would return to competition in a few weeks. "I woke up in the morning feeling cuts on my body," she said. "I felt so scared. I didn't know that I was going to be cut open." She hasn't returned to the sport and has suffered from depression and joint pain since the operation. YouTuber Khadija Mbo made a good video in 2024 about women, particularly black women, being transvestigated in sports. So I highly suggest you check that out, since they have a particular perspective on the matter that I clearly do not. As Derek Clifton wrote for them in 2021, there's a long history of black women athletes' bodies being policed in sports, with people making cruel remarks about their perceived femininity and creating racist depictions of their physicality. Natural competitive advantages are barely, if at all, ever questioned when it comes to men in sports. Even today, people have an internalized sexism that makes them believe that a woman competing on an elite level must secretly be a man. Katie Ledecky, 14-time Olympic medal swimmer, has also been transvestigated by Twitter keyboard warriors. Ledecky, to those who are unfamiliar with her, has been falsely mistaken as transgender, further proving the point that they can indeed not always tell. At an elite level, all of the athletes have some sort of advantage over the others, whether it's their height, their coaching, or their lung capacity. No one would ever win if people did not have natural and competitive advantages. We'd just be giving medals away to everyone. Intersex competitors and trans competitors, while facing different challenges, also have many overlaps in the way that they are persecuted by sports governing bodies. What is considered fair in sports is in some ways a complex issue. There are obvious differences between all of us, cis, trans, or intersex, but how these differences are regulated in sports has been, throughout history, ineffective and often discriminatory. Over time, people have looked at genitalia, they've looked at chromosomes, they look for a specific gene, they've looked at testosterone. And what we end up with is understanding that there's really no clear-cut definition of sex, because each of these iterations of testing has kind of collapsed under its own weight, said Jamie Schultz, a professor with Penn State University's Department of Kinesiology. Everyone has both masculine and feminine attributes, male and female characteristics. It is, first and foremost, impossible to tell whether someone is actually trans just by looking at them. It is also difficult to define what female and male even mean. Intersex people exist and can have various different sorts of biological attributes, regardless of whether they were raised as a man or a woman. Like it goes with transvestigating, the rigorous and often humiliating testing of female athletes harms not only the very small amount of actual trans athletes, but also directly harms cisgender women or intersex women who may not have even known that they have had a difference in their sexual development. Trans people in sports, while having some obvious complexities that should be discussed, has never truly been about fairness. It's about a culture war, exterminating trans people from public life and making sure every woman fits a racist, colonialist, and traditionalist set of gender roles. Everyone has a mix of different sex characteristics. We have our sex chromosomes, which can be XY, typically seen in males, and XX, typically seen in females, but some people may even have an extra Y or X chromosome. Our primary sex characteristics are things like a penis and vagina, or ovaries and testicles, which produce different levels of different hormones. Again, these can vary greatly among people. Then we have our secondary sex characteristics, which mostly result in our outward appearance. Males will typically have facial hair, a deeper voice, and even larger hearts. Females typically develop breast, higher voices, and more body fat. All of these vary greatly, even within people who are not intersex. Attempting to define male and female and man and woman in the strictest terms doesn't protect real women from transgender people. It only excludes them. Accepting people for who they are and what they look like opens a door for a wider range of gender expression, which will of course allow a safer world for trans people, but also for gender nonconforming and or intersex people. And now here we are, the essential reason why this video is being made. Algerian boxer Imane Khelif. I already summarized her story, so let's just cut straight to the chase. Khelif was one of 2 boxers disqualified from the 2023 International Boxing Association IBA Championship tournament after she failed an unspecified eligibility test midway through the bracket. The nature and results of that test have not been made public, but IBA President Umar Kremlev told the Russian news agency TASS it was a DNA test that showed Khelif had XY chromosomes. The IBA, however, had lost credibility within the International Olympic Committee, who cited concerns over corruption when Kremlev took over. The new governing body, World Boxing, has taken the IBA's place. Now, a year after Khelif's hate campaign, an alleged document has been leaked by 3 Wire Sports, allegedly showing that Khelif's biological sex is male. The 3 Wire Sports report, published on June 1st, 2025, alleged that the outlet was the only one to have seen chromosome tests given amid the IBA's 2022 and 2023 World Championships. The report includes a screenshot of the alleged test results, which appear to have been cut in half. It is unclear how the outlet accessed these test results or if they are legitimate. Interestingly enough, after these results were leaked, World Boxing mentioned Khelif by name, which they later had to apologize for in their announcement of their new sex testing. Imane Khelif may not participate in the female category at Eindhoven Box Cup 5-10 June 2025 and any World Boxing event until Imane Khelif undergoes genetic sex screening in accordance with World Boxing's rules and testing procedures. A letter from World Boxing to the Algerian Boxing Foundation states. The test, called a PCR test with a 97% accuracy rate in adults, would determine whether athletes have XY or XX chromosomes. To transvestigators who accused Khelif of being trans during the Olympics, this was proof that she really was a man. But to anyone who isn't brain-rotted by the asbestos in their grifter mansion, it's more complex than that. Khelif, by all accounts, is a woman. Having XY chromosomes doesn't make her a man any more than a woman having hirsutism does. Even if Khelif had XY chromosomes, it wouldn't automatically bar her from competing in women's competitions in the Olympics. As of right now, higher testosterone is considered by most sports governing bodies to be the key advantage of competitors in female sports, although some of the studies that have been provided as proof for this advantage have been questioned. The IOC specifically operates on a case-by-case basis, which obviously has its flaws, but overall the requirement is that female competitors must have a testosterone level under 2.5 nanometers per liter of blood. On top of this, the IOC does not allow trans athletes to compete unless they did not undergo a puberty in line with their assigned sex. In fact, not a single competitor in the 2024 Olympics was transgender. In NCAA schools, around 10 or so athletes are transgender. There has been no evidence that Khelif has naturally higher levels of testosterone. Transvestigators needed something to cling to, though. On top of bullying high school children, they chose to go after a woman who did nothing except excel in her athleticism. Not only was this inhumane and hateful, but it also could have, if it already hasn't, put Khelif in danger. As I covered in the beginning of the video, Algeria's government is not friendly to the LGBTQ community, including intersex people, although it has not been confirmed as to whether Khelif is actually intersex. Forcing those under scrutiny to take a test is humiliating enough, but on top of that, forcing these athletes to publicly reveal their results and come under transphobic scrutiny is disgusting and dangerous. In Algeria, female athletes specifically also struggle to achieve success due to financial or infrastructural issues. Dr. Khadija Boussad, a sociologist and researcher at the Center for Research in Applied Economics for Development at the University of Algiers II, told the New Arab, "Women are significantly underrepresented in sports. When we combine the statistics from the Ministry of Youth and Sports, the Algerian Olympic Federation, and other international institutions, we find that only 14% of women participate in sports in Algeria." Most of the trans sports debate centers around women who aren't actually trans, or a number of trans competitors in elite sports that can easily be counted on two hands, without resetting the count. Transgender male athletes, well, they're barely even discussed in this debate. Even to the extent that when a transgender male wrestler was forced to compete against a woman, Twitter went into an uproar, immediately assuming that this trans man was actually a transgender woman beating up a real woman in their sport. Even when we're talking about intersex athletes, or alleged intersex athletes, and not transgender female competitors, anti-trans pundits argue that even they shouldn't be allowed to compete against other women. In one post, Rolling shared an article by anti-trans columnist Suzanne Moore, asserting that Khelif was likely intersex, but that she and other intersex women should choose not to cheat or cause injury by competing against other cis women in competitions. Moore's article repeatedly and falsely referred to Khelif and intersex people in general as biologically male, opining that calling them women was pathetic, and called the IOC disgusting for allowing Khelif to compete. It's not just about trans people, it's about anyone who doesn't fit the exact mold of man and woman. We also can't ignore the fact that Khelif is not white. As I've covered throughout this video, non-white and particularly darker skinned athletes are targeted more than their white peers. Jessie Gender made a great video following the Olympics controversy, covering the racism involved in the transvestigation of Khelif and other non-white athletes, so I'll link that down below. I'll also link 3 different episodes from Matt Bernstein's A Bit Fruity podcast that cover transvestigation in Imane Khelif, the trans sports panic, and other related topics. All the episodes are great, so I'd highly recommend you check them out. In The Policing and Punishment of Black Girl Magic in Sports, Leticia Ingracia Cordoso Brown, PhD, states, "We live in a world that asks black femmes, girls, and women to shrink, alter, and bend themselves in order to be given a modicum of support. Athletes such as Michael Phelps are lauded for a body that has been said to give him a competitive edge, but Serena's muscular physique remains an issue in the media's lens." The Psychiatric Times reported that Sumiko Wilson interviewed black female athletes about how sports weaponize racist beauty standards against them. Tennis player Sasha Exeter recalled, "I was told I looked manly or overdeveloped and overmuscular and didn't feel feminine." Following this controversy, Imane Khelif was seen in a photo online wearing a full face of makeup and a dress while posing with her gold medal. To me, it's kind of sad that she felt the need to go to a feminine extreme in order for people to see her as the woman that she is. What's even more sad is that the people who harassed her after her Olympic win didn't budge even a little bit after these images were posted. No matter what she does, or anyone who has been transvestigated, they will never be man or woman enough. You can prove yourself time and time again, but it doesn't matter. Not only that, but people shouldn't have to prove themselves in order to be respected as who they are, whether they are trans or cis. Even Margot Robbie, the physical embodiment of the Barbie doll, has been transvestigated. There is no winning. It doesn't end at sports. Transvestigating, while being incredibly ridiculous and confusing to anyone who isn't a basement dweller, is incredibly dangerous to everyone. Transgender people, for one, are at a 4 times higher risk of being victims of a violent crime. In a world where discrimination, hate, and violence against trans people is normalized, cisgender people also can face higher rates of violence, as gender nonconforming women are harassed in bathrooms, as feminine men are faced with extreme homophobia. In a case that was both a racially motivated and gender hate crime, 59-year-old Michelle Diane Peacock was murdered in 2023 by her neighbor, who slit her throat. During interviews with investigators, Peacock's killer allegedly referred to Peacock as a male acting like a woman several times, per Fox 59, and that he would do it again. He also reportedly told investigators that he needed to be kept away from black inmates, saying that he does not get along with them. Peacock wasn't a trans woman, though. While it would have been heinous either way, the murder was still apparently motivated by transphobia. Michelle Peacock, a black woman, was murdered for that. Peacock was also allegedly bullied by her killer for some time, but nothing was done when she complained about it. Again, in a world where violence against trans people is normalized, where transvestigators fear that everyone is secretly trans with their transition being funded by rich Jews, anyone who is on the fringe of gender or who is perceived to be can be attacked. Transvestigation and transphobia, to some extent, harms everyone. You can't have feminism without trans liberation. You can't have trans liberation without anti-colonialism and anti-racism. Women like Riley Gaines and J.K. Rowling are not feminist. They're just freaks. I need to make it clear that transphobia does not affect cis people and trans people in the same way, and that many trans people have had issues with the argument that transphobia harms everyone. In defense of it, this argument is used as a way to appeal to those who may not have cared about transphobia otherwise. By centering cisgender people who are viewed as normal and actually human, you can play into the harm against them from anti-trans hate as a way to get more people to empathize with the trans cause. It's like trying to get an American to care about brown people being bombed by America and Israel in the Middle East. Some might choose to make the point that our tax dollars are being used in order to play out these genocidal campaigns so that they can get an average American to actually care. For both of these scenarios, the average American belief is, if it doesn't affect me or those I deem worthy of life, then why should I care? Like I mentioned earlier, trans people face higher rates of violence, poverty, homelessness, job loss, and so much more. Cis people may face harassment due to the way that they look or are perceived, but it is not on the same scale of transphobia that actual trans people face by any means. The trans sports issue, while having negative consequences for all female athletes, affects intersex and trans athletes in the most direct way. At the same time, all of our struggles are interconnected. Michelle Peacock wasn't just a cis woman. She was a black woman who faced higher rates of poverty and violence. Intersex athletes who have been the victims of transvestigation campaigns are not just people who are raised cisgender. They are people who vary from the conservative idea of what a man and a woman is. We need to recognize that these systems hurt everyone in different ways and to varying degrees. I personally think that it's important to discuss how everyone is harmed by these trans sports policies and anti-trans hate. A world where trans people are respected and have policies and communities that protect them and their rights is important, first and foremost for trans people, but also for everyone who will be affected in one way or another by the waves of anti-trans hate. Trans people will always exist, no matter how much people try to eliminate them. The attempt to exterminate them will harm everyone. Like I said, everything is connected. Trans people, and specifically trans athletes, are the easiest targets now, but it will continue to move up the ladder until everyone who isn't a perfect American citizen is persecuted. First they came for the communists. Wait. That's how that poem starts? Well, that's it for me, and that's it for this video. Let me know what you all thought about this video. Comment down below anything you want to comment down below. I'd like to give a special shout out to my Patreon members who are part of my Alpha and Delta tiers. Thank you so much to Olivia Schutt, Romana Zharavko, and Dallas Andrade. I truly appreciate your continued support. It genuinely means a lot to me. If you want to become a patron, the link will be down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you like me, you can subscribe. I post videos about whatever I feel like talking about, so if that sounds like a thing, make sure to subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you know when I post a video. I post my videos the same time whenever they go up. It's Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Write it down. Don't forget it. Anyway, I really hope you all enjoyed this video, but more importantly, I really hope I see you in the next video. I know I say it all the time, but like, you'll be there, right? Right?